Is this some kind of joke? Gunnery Sergeant Miller's voice cracked across the firing line like a rifle shot. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning with irritation, but not at his Marines. His glare was fixed on the quiet old man standing just beyond the sandbags. 82 years old, dressed in faded jeans and a work shirt, holding a rifle wrapped in cloth as if it were nothing more than firewood. Dean Peters didn't flinch. His pale blue eyes drifted across the range, watching the flag snap in different directions, watching the shimmer of the mirage boil above the rocks. To the young Marines, it was all chaos. To him, it was a language. Miller took a hard step forward, chest out, tactical vest clattering with gear worth more than Dean's pickup truck. This is a restricted live fire range for force recon snipers. Civilian presence is prohibited. You need to leave. Now Dean finally spoke, his voice low and calm. The wind's tricky today. It isn't just one wind, it's three. The younger Marines exchanged uneasy glances. Their ballistic computers had been spitting out useless firing solutions all morning, but none of them dared admit it. Miller let out a short laugh. 3 winds. Listen, Pops, we've got equipment for that. Coriolis effect, spin drift, barometric pressure. This isn't about holding up a wet finger. Dean just shrugged. That computer of yours can't see the updrafts and downdrafts between here and the target. You're trying to solve one problem, but your bullet has to fly through 3. The Marines shifted, uncertain. And in that moment, none of them could guess who Dean Peters truly was, or how his presence would turn their entire world upside down. The morning heat hung heavy over Whiskey Jack Range, a stretch of desolate desert training ground carved out of scrubland and stone. It was the kind of place designed to test not only the rifles, but the men behind them. Reconnaissance Marines lay prone on their mats, sweating under layers of gear, eyes straining through optics as the horizon shimmered like a mirage. Their target was simple in shape, but brutal in distance. A steel silhouette just over 1,700 yards away. To the naked eye, it was a speck, nearly lost against the wavering background of heat and dust. To hit it meant more than just good shooting. It meant mastery of physics, patience, and a kind of intuition that no manual could teach. Yet despite the cutting-edge Kestrel wind meters strapped to their wrists and the advanced ballistic solvers glowing on their screens, the Marines had failed again and again. Bullets went wide, some sailing low into the dirt, others vanishing far left or right into the scrub. Every miss echoed like an insult against their skill, the metallic silence from the target more deafening than a gunshot. Gunnery Sergeant Miller prowled behind them, his presence a storm cloud of authority. 15 years in the Corps had carved him into the image of a modern warrior, fit, confident, clad in tactical armor and bristling with technology. He barked corrections, slammed his hand against spotting scopes, demanded answers his Marines could not give. The exercise had been designed to simulate combat in Afghanistan's mountains or Iraq's desert plains, places where one wrong calculation could mean a mission lost or a Marine killed. But here, on their own training ground, they were being humbled by the invisible hand of the wind. Adjust again. Red the flag, Miller shouted, his voice carrying over the barren range. But even the flags were lying. One snapped left to right, another twisted lazily in the opposite direction, while mirage waves rolled and boiled like some taunting mirage sea. The Marines were drowning in confusion, and Miller's patience was running dry. That was the moment Dean Peters appeared, silent, unnoticed at first, as if he had simply stepped out of the desert itself. Most Marines knew him only as the groundskeeper. They'd seen him mowing the grass near the barracks or repairing fences with a quiet efficiency that drew no attention. Some said he had a limp, others whispered about his faraway stare, but nobody had ever thought twice. He was just the old man who kept the base tidy. And yet, standing at the edge of the firing line, wrapped rifle in hand, he seemed to belong there in a way that unsettled the younger men. His calmness was a stark contrast to the frustration crackling through their ranks. Where Miller burned with impatience, Dean radiated quiet certainty, as though the wind itself whispered truths only he could hear. The Marines shifted uncomfortably. They didn't want to disrespect their gunnery sergeant, but something about the old man's presence made their doubts heavier. Lance Corporal Evans, youngest of the group, pressed his eye to his spotting scope, and studied the shimmering air. For the first time, Dean's words about 3 winds made more sense than all the digital readings blinking on their screens. Whiskey Jack Range had humbled them all morning. Now, it was about to reveal something even more shocking, that sometimes the past holds the answers the future cannot see. Dean began to unwrap the long cloth in his hands, and the Marines leaned forward to spite themselves. What emerged was not the sleek carbon fiber chassis of a modern sniper system, nor the adjustable stocks and custom barrels they had grown accustomed to. Instead, it was a rifle of wood and steel, scarred and aged, yet solid in a way that seemed almost timeless. The walnut stock bore dents and gouges, each mark a story. The blued barrel carried the patina of decades. Mounted on top was a simple scope, lacking the turret adjustments and illuminated reticles of their current gear. It was an M40, an icon of the Marine Corps sniper program during the Vietnam War. The young Marines had seen it in books and in glass cases at museums, but never in the flesh, and certainly never in the hands of an old groundskeeper who looked more like someone's grandfather than a warrior. Miller barked a short, derisive laugh. "You cannot be serious. That thing belongs in a museum. You think it can even reach the target? That barrel is worn smooth." His words cut the air like barbed wire, designed to humiliate. But Dean didn't answer. His pale eyes seemed to drift elsewhere, away from the shimmering range, away from Miller's mockery. The heat dissolved. The years fell away. He was 19 again. The air was heavy, not dry, thick, humid, and stinking of mud and decay. Vietnam. Rain fell in sheets, warm and relentless, plastering his utilities to his skin. He lay belly down in a nest of ferns, his heart steady against the earth. The gouge on his rifle stock, fresh then, was carved by shrapnel from a mortar round that had landed too close. Through the scope, simple as it was, he watched a clearing half a mile away. An enemy machine gun was being set up, its barrel soon to pin down an entire platoon of Marines caught in the mud. Dean breathed out half a breath, steadied the crosshairs, and listened. Not to machines, not to instruments, to the jungle itself. The angle of a leaf trembling, the tilt of raindrops in the canopy, the subtle dance of wind hidden from all but the most patient eye. He squeezed the trigger, and the rifle answered with a quiet thud, a sound swallowed by the jungle. A man fell. A platoon lived. The memory snapped shut. Dean was back at Whiskey Jack Range, the desert sun burning his neck, the jeers of Miller still hanging in the air. But something in his presence had changed. He seemed heavier, not in body but in spirit, as if carrying the weight of every life his rifle had once defended. Lance Corporal Evans shifted on his mat, unease tightening in his chest. He had grown up hearing whispers in the barracks about an old man with a limp who kept to himself. Legends that he had once been somebody. Looking now at the M40, Evans felt the pieces clicking together in a way that made his pulse quicken. Miller, blinded by pride, pressed harder. He stepped closer, voice dripping with sarcasm. "So, Grandpa, you think you can do better?" With that, relic. He jabbed a finger toward the gouge in the stock. "That thing is going to hurt you before it hits anything." Dean finally met Miller's eyes. Not angry, not afraid, but steady, like bedrock. "The gear helps," he said quietly, "but it doesn't replace what's in here." He tapped his temple with one weathered finger. Evans swallowed hard. He respected the chain of command, but he also respected something deeper, the kind of authority that no rank insignia could grant. He knew Miller was pushing into dangerous territory, and if his suspicions about Dean Peters were right, the gunny had no idea who he was dealing with. Evans' decision came quick, instinctive. He raised his hand. "Gunny, my spotting scope's reticle is swimming." Nitrogen seal must have cracked in the heat. Permission to take it to the armory? Miller waved him off, more annoyed than anything. "Whatever, just fix it. We're not leaving until someone hits that target." Evans grabbed his scope, jogged away, and the moment he was out of sight, his heart hammered like a drum. He wasn't going to the armory. He was going to make a call that would change everything. Evans ducked behind a line of Humvees, hands trembling as he pulled out his phone. The desert sun beat down on his helmet, but the chill in his stomach was colder than ice. He scrolled quickly, found the number he needed, and pressed call. The voice that answered was gravelly, impatient. Armory, Master Gunnery Sergeant Phillips speaking. Evans swallowed. Master Guns, this is Lance Corporal Evans from Charlie Company. Sir, you're not going to believe this. Don't tell me you broke another $30,000 scope, Phillips growled. No, Master Guns. I'm out at Whiskey Jack Range with Gunny Miller's team. He's tearing into that old groundskeeper, the quiet one with the limp. He's got a rifle with him. An old M40 Evans hesitated, lowering his voice. He called him Dean Peters. Silence. Heavy, absolute silence on the other end. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Evans could hear his own heart thudding in his ears. When Phillips spoke again, his tone had changed. Urgent, tight. Son, are you telling me Dean Peters is on that range right now? Yes, Master Guns. Stay there. Do not, under any circumstances, let Gunny Miller put a hand on him. Do whatever you have to do. I'm making a call. The line went dead. Evans exhaled shakily. He had the distinct feeling he'd just pulled the pin on a grenade. Across base in a stuffy office stacked with budget reports, Colonel Marcus Hayes was enduring the kind of meeting that made combat feel merciful by comparison. His aide, pale-faced, burst into the room without knocking. Sir, urgent call on your line from Master Guns Phillips. He says, it's a Whiskey Jack protocol. Hayes frowned. There was no such thing. But Phillips wasn't a man prone to exaggeration. Hayes lifted the phone. This is Hayes. The colonel listened in silence, his posture stiffening, knuckles whitening around the receiver. Then came the words that drained the blood from his face. Say that name again. Are you absolutely certain? He slammed the phone onto its cradle and rose in one violent motion. Captain, get my vehicle. Sergeant Major meets us at the entrance in 2 minutes. Lights and sirens. We're going to Whiskey Jack. Minutes later, the silence of the range was shattered by the distant wail of sirens. Dust plumes rose on the access road, growing larger with each second. A convoy of black command Humvees and a military police cruiser tore across the desert. Lights flashing. Miller froze mid-sentence, his hand still gripping Dean Peters' shoulder. The younger Marines straightened instinctively, hearts pounding with confusion. Something was happening that none of them understood. The convoy skidded to a halt. Doors slammed open. Out stepped Colonel Hayes, uniform immaculate, his face thunderous. Beside him strode the base sergeant major, a man carved from granite. The air itself seemed to still. And for the first time in his career, gunnery, Sergeant Miller realized he might have made a catastrophic mistake. Colonel Hayes didn't waste a second on greetings. His eyes locked on Miller's hand, still resting on Dean's shoulder. The colonel's jaw tightened and his gaze became knives. Miller jerked his hand back as if he'd touched fire, face draining of color. Then the unthinkable happened. Colonel Hayes snapped into the sharpest salute the Marines had ever seen. Back ramrod straight, eyes fixed on the quiet old man in worn jeans. Mr. Peters, his voice boomed across the silent range. Sir, I apologize for the conduct of my Marines. There is no excuse for the disrespect you've been shown here today. Gas rippled through the sniper team. Their gunnery sergeant stood paralyzed, stripped of authority in an instant. The sergeant major leaned close to Miller, voice low and lethal. Gunny, what in God's name did you think you were doing? Hayes turned to the stunned Marines, his tone cutting like steel. You failed this test all morning because you believed the gadget strapped to your rifles made you marksmen. But while you struggled, you disrespected a man whose boots you aren't worthy to polish. He gestured toward Dean. Allow me to introduce Chief Warrant Officer 5 Dean Peters, retired. The ghost of the Ashau Valley. Third longest confirmed kill in Marine Corps history, made in a monsoon with winds that would make today feel like a calm breeze. And he made that shot with this very rifle your gunnery sergeant just called a museum piece. The revelation hit like artillery. The Marines stared, wide-eyed at the old M40. Dean simply nodded, expression calm, almost weary. Sir, Hayes said, softer now, would you do us the honor of showing these men how it's done? Dean lay down with deliberate movements, settling behind the rifle. No bipod, just his battered rucksack. He scanned the range, voice steady as he instructed. The shimmer at 1,000 yards. Thermal, right to left. The grass at 1,500, leaning toward you. The flag at the target, it's lying. You aim for the window in the wind. He adjusted the scope with quiet clicks, exhaled half a breath, and squeezed. The M40 cracked. 2.5 seconds of silence, then clear and pure, the metallic ring of bullet on steel. Dead center. The Marines erupted, cheers breaking through their disbelief. A legend had spoken, and the target had answered. The cheers faded into silence, leaving only the smell of hot brass and desert wind. Colonel Hayes gave a single nod, pride flickering in his eyes before his voice dropped cold again. He turned on Miller. "Gunnery Sergeant, your arrogance blinded you. You had a living legend standing here, offering wisdom for free, and you treated him like a trespasser. You failed in your duty, not just as a sniper, but as a teacher." Miller's shoulders slumped. His voice cracked. "Sir, no excuse, sir." "There is no excuse," Hayes snapped. "You and your team will report for remedial training. Your instructor will be Mr. Peters if he accepts." Dean rose slowly, joints stiff but steady. He walked to Miller and rested a weathered hand on the younger Marine's shoulder. The same gesture Miller had tried in anger. Dean's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "The gear helps, Gunny, but it doesn't replace what's in here." He tapped his temple. "The wind doesn't care about your computer. It just is. You have to learn to listen." And so he taught. The weeks that followed transformed Whiskey Jack Range. Each morning, a circle of Marines, once bristling with gadgets, sat cross-legged in the dust, notebooks forgotten. At the center sat Dean Peters, holding nothing more than a blade of grass. He showed them how the flutter of that grass revealed more than a $10,000 weather station. He explained how mirage wasn't just distortion, but a roadmap of the air. He taught patience, silence, observation, skills the Corps had once demanded, now dulled by over-reliance on electronics. Under Dean's guidance, those lessons came alive again. The Marines learned not just to fire their rifles, but to read the world around them. In time, the Marine Corps officially added his teachings into the advanced sniper curriculum. They called it the Peters Wind Doctrine, a legacy born not of machinery, but of instinct, humility, and respect for nature's invisible hand. For Miller, the change was personal. A month later, off-duty in civilian clothes, he spotted Dean at the local hardware store studying packets of tomato seeds. Miller hesitated, then approached. "Mr. Peters," he began, voice low, "I just wanted to say thank you. You taught me more in a week than I've learned in 5 years." Dean smiled, warm and unassuming. "You're a good Marine, son. You were just trying to read the book instead of the weather." He held up the seed packet with a wink. "It's all about paying attention to the little things." Miller watched him walk away, humbled in a way that no reprimand could teach. Dean Peters wasn't just a legend. He was living proof that the strongest weapon a Marine could ever carry was not the rifle in his hands, but the wisdom in his head. If Dean Peters' story moved you, take a moment to reflect on what it truly means to serve. This wasn't just about hitting a steel target at 1,700 yards. It was about the weight of history carried in silence, the kind of wisdom forged in jungles half a world away and passed down quietly to a new generation of Marines. Every scar on that old M40 told a story. Every lesson Dean gave was a reminder that technology may change, uniforms may change, but the essence of a warrior remains the same: patience, humility, and the will to protect your brothers. So I want to hear from you. What part of Dean's journey struck you the hardest? Was it the flashback to Vietnam, the legendary shot on the range, or the way he taught respect without ever raising his voice? Leave your thoughts in the comments, share the story with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in our series of untold veteran stories. Because sometimes the quietest heroes leave the loudest echoes.